Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make a knife pleated skirt. And I think that these skirts are super cute, so I'm excited to try and make one for myself. I've made a couple in the past, but it's been quite a few years. But this tutorial today is going to be specifically for knit or stretch fabrics. I would do a lot of things differently if I was making this pleated skirt out of a woven or non-stretch fabric. So that's a little disclaimer for this video. If you're using a non-stretch fabric, this tutorial might not work for you. With that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So the first thing that you're gonna do is take your waist measurement. That way you know how big to make your waistband and how much fabric to cut out for your skirt. So you wanna measure your waist wherever you want the skirt to sit. So if you want it to sit lower, you're gonna measure down here, and higher, you measure up here. So I'm just gonna measure around my natural waistline here. Okay, so here is why this tutorial is specifically for stretch fabric or for knit fabrics. So when you're working with something stretchy, you have a lot more fabric to work with than you really think you do. So there's this thing called negative ease. Negative ease is when the garment you're making is intended to be smaller than your measurements. So you might be thinking, that's not gonna fit me. But in fact, there's a lot of garments made from stretch fabric, such as knits, which are made to stretch to fit your body. As an example, think about a swimsuit. It's very common that a swimsuit looks like it's way too small because it's not on a person's body. The garment has been designed to work with the stretch of the fabric to give you a good fit. The hard part is determining how much negative ease you should have based on what kind of fabric you have. One tip that I'll give you is to make the skirt a little bit wider than what you think you need, just in case your fabric doesn't have as much stretch as you originally thought. That way you can always cut it down later and make it smaller, but once you cut something out too small, it's very hard to fix it and make it your size again.
I'm so sorry guys, we are about to do some math.
I'm going to make my garment about 20% smaller than my measurements to account for the stretch of the fabric. My waist measurement was about 25 inches, so I'm going to make my waistband 20 inches plus 1 inch for seam allowance. My waistband piece is cut to 21 inches by 4 inches. Typically for a pleated skirt, the width will need to be 3 times your waist measurement plus seam allowance. Since I reduced the waistband to 20 inches, 20 times 3 is 60 inches. So I have to cut a piece that is 61 inches to account for the seam allowance. For the length, you can make it however long you want your skirt to be. Keep in mind that you will need about 5/8 of an inch of extra fabric for the hem of the skirt. I cut out my waistband from a black scuba knit fabric and then the skirt piece from this striped knit fabric. I'm making 1 inch pleats, so I'm going to mark my skirt every 1 inch until I reach the end of my fabric. Alright, so the other fabric is really hard to see, so I just want to show you how to do the pleats on this white piece of fabric here. So you're going to measure every inch of the fabric if you're doing 1 inch pleats. So I'm just going to put a mark at every inch. Just like that. Each of these marks is going to repeat in a pattern of 3. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to draw on here. 1, 2, 3. So the first thing that I'm going to do is put a pin in each one mark. So pin here. And this is really helpful if you're not numbering them the way that I am here, because usually you don't want to write this much on your fabric. So it's better if you use pins instead. So we have all of the ones marked with pins. And now what you're going to do to create the pleats is you're going to fold the 1 mark all the way over to 3. So I'm going to fold that to the 3 mark. Take my pin out and then pin it in place there. So that's how I've made my first pleat. Now you're going to take the next one and you're going to fold it over to 3. Take the pin out, pin it in place, just like that. Now let me show you from this angle because it might make a little bit more sense if you see it this way. I'm going to take my 1 and I'm going to fold it over to 3. This whole thing folds with it. I guess since I'm at this other angle, it's easier for me to put the pin in this way. So this is the start of our knife pleats, and then you just keep doing that until you get to the end of your fabric. Here I'm repeating the steps I've just shown you on my striped knit fabric. At this point, you could iron the pleats in place, but I'm just going to go ahead and sew it on my machine. I'm sewing along the top edge of my fabric with a zigzag stitch to secure the pleats. If you want your fabric to maintain its stretch, it's very important that you use a zigzag stitch instead of a straight stitch. Also make sure that you're sewing in the opposite direction of your pleats. This will make sure that your pleats lay flat and don't get bunched up on the other side of your fabric. I have all the pleats sewn on, and now I need to attach the waistband. Again, since I want the fabric to maintain its stretch here, I will not be adding any interfacing as I normally would to a waistband. So I folded the fabric for my waistband in half and pinned it to my skirt. Then I sewed it in place with a zigzag stitch. I folded my skirt in half and pinned it together. This seam is going to be in the back of my skirt. I'm being very careful here to match up the stripes on both sides of the fabric. If you're not using a striped fabric, you don't have to be as careful here. Then I used a straight stitch to sew the two sides of the skirt together. Okay, so I've tried it on and the waistband fits pretty good. I'm really happy about that. And that's just to show you what negative ease can do. For your garments that are made of knit fabrics or stretchy fabrics, it's very important that you keep in mind that the fabrics do stretch out, so you don't want to make it as long as you would have if you were working with a woven fabric like cotton. So I hope that's a little bit helpful when it comes to cutting out your stretchy materials. Okay, so because I sewed this with a zigzag stitch, it kept a lot of its stretch. So you can see that it still has quite a bit of stretch to it. So now we just need to hem the skirt. So after trying the skirt on, I think I want it to be just a little bit shorter, so I'm going to cut a little bit of the fabric off before I start doing the hem. I like to make my skirt patterns a little bit longer because it's always easier to cut the fabric to be shorter, but once you've already made something too short, it's really hard to fix. Okay, moving on to the hem. So to do a rolled hem, you are going to fold the fabric over twice. So here I'm going to fold it over once, and I'm measuring to my next, I think it's a brownish tan line here, because that's where I want my skirt to end. So I'm going to fold it up to that line, and then I'm going to fold it up again, and then I just want a little bit of this brown peeking through at the bottom here. That way I don't see any white when I hem my skirt. Put a pin there, and then you're just going to do this all the way around the bottom of your skirt by rolling the fabric over twice. If I didn't have the stripes as a guide, I typically roll my fabric up about 1/2 of an inch and then roll it again another 1/2 an inch. If you aren't sure what 1/2 an inch looks like, you can use a ruler while pinning the hem in place. I sewed my hem in place with a straight stitch. There's no reason for the fabric at the bottom of the skirt to be stretchy, so I find that a straight stitch actually makes a much cleaner finish. Make sure to go slow when working with stretch fabric so that you don't warp the bottom of the skirt. Try to feed the fabric through the machine without stretching it out. I sewed as close as possible to the edge of my rolled hem. This thread goes through the black stripe on the front of my fabric so you can hardly see it. And that's it, my skirt is done. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you want to see more videos from me in the future, you can subscribe to my channel. I make sewing and DIY videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye!